Hey guys, tonight we're diving into one of history's most enchanting mysteries. The strange tale of Silk Road merchants who carried pouches of singing sand in their pockets. We'll discover why these seemingly ordinary grains held such extraordinary power for traders crossing the vast deserts of Central Asia, and how a simple handful of sand could mean the difference between fortune and disaster on the ancient trade routes. You're probably thinking, sand is just sand, right? Well, you're about to discover that some sand has secrets that would make your smartphone's GPS look like a child's toy. These merchants weren't just carrying around random desert debris. They were carrying acoustic compasses, weather predictors, and even currency that could literally sing its own value. And honestly, if you tried to navigate the Taklamakan Desert with nothing but a pouch of humming sand and your wits, you probably wouldn't survive the first sandstorm. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight and what time it is where you are. Drop a comment and let me know. Are you winding down after a long day in New York, or perhaps starting your evening routine in London? Maybe you're listening under the stars in Australia. I find it fascinating how we're all connected through these ancient stories, no matter where we are in the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The silk merchant's tent sits abandoned in the pre-dawn darkness, its fabric walls shifting gently in the desert breeze. You approach cautiously, your footsteps muffled by the fine sand that seems to cover everything in this remote corner of the Taklamakan Desert. The year is 847 CE, and you've stumbled upon what appears to be the hastily abandoned camp of a Tang Dynasty trading caravan. As you push aside the tent flap, the musty smell of aged leather and exotic spices fills your nostrils. Moonlight filters through the fabric, casting ghostly shadows across scattered belongings. Silk rolls partially unbound, ceramic vessels overturned, and brass instruments whose purpose you can only guess at. But something else catches your attention, a soft, almost musical humming that seems to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. You follow the sound, stepping carefully over a toppled incense burner and around a wooden chest whose intricate carvings speak of distant craftsmanship. The humming grows stronger, more distinct, until you realize it's coming from a small leather pouch that lies half-buried beneath a pile of trading documents written in characters you don't recognize. The pouch is unremarkable at first glance. Simple brown leather, worn smooth by countless hands, secured with a drawstring that's been tied and retied so many times the knots have formed permanent grooves in the cord. But as you lift it, the humming intensifies, and you can feel a subtle vibration through the leather, as if the pouch contains something alive. Your fingers work at the drawstring, and as the pouch opens, you're greeted not by precious stones or gold coins, but by what appears to be ordinary sand. Yet this sand is different. Each grain catches the moonlight with an almost crystalline clarity. And when you pour a small amount into your palm, the humming transforms into something that can only be described as a melody. The sand feels warm against your skin, warmer than it should be in the cool desert night. As you shift your hand slightly, the pitch of the sound changes, creating harmonies that seem to resonate not just in your ears, but in your very bones. It's simultaneously soothing and unsettling, like hearing the desert itself singing lullabies to the stars. You notice that the merchant who owned this pouch was no ordinary trader. Scattered around the tent are maps drawn on silk, their routes marked not with conventional landmarks, but with strange symbols that look almost musical in nature. Wavy lines intersect with dots and dashes, creating patterns that remind you of ancient notation systems. Could these be songs? Or perhaps some kind of code? A leather-bound journal catches your eye, its pages filled with careful observations written in multiple languages. Chinese characters alongside Persian script, Arabic numerals mixed with what might be Sanskrit. The handwriting is precise, methodical, the work of someone who understood that knowledge was just as valuable as any cargo they might carry. You manage to decipher a few passages. The merchant writes about the sand that remembers, describing how certain grains from specific dunes could hold their songs for months, even years, if properly preserved. He notes that the finest singing sand comes from dunes that have been undisturbed for centuries, where the wind has shaped each grain into perfect spheres, polished smooth by countless tiny collisions. The journal reveals that this merchant, whose name appears to be Liu Wei, was part of a select group of traders who specialized in what they called the desert's music. They understood that singing sand wasn't just a curiosity, it was a tool, a guide, and in some cases, a form of currency more valuable than silk or spices. As you continue reading, you discover that Liu Wei had spent decades learning to distinguish between different types of singing sand. Sand from the Bedtime desert sang in deep, resonant tones that could be heard for miles on still nights. Grains from the Mingsha dunes near Dunhuang produced higher, more crystalline notes that seemed to dance on the air. And then there was the rarest sand of all, grains from the Rubal Kali, the empty quarter, whose songs were said to predict weather changes days in advance. The merchant's notes describe how experienced traders could identify their location simply by listening to the sand beneath their feet. Each region's sand had its own acoustic signature, its own particular way of responding to wind and pressure. A handful of sand from a known location could serve as a reference point, allowing traders to navigate by sound even when stars were obscured by sandstorms. You pour more sand into your palm, listening as the melody shifts and changes. The sound is hypnotic, almost meditative, and you begin to understand why these merchants might have found comfort in carrying such an unusual companion. In the vast loneliness of the desert, where silence could stretch for days, the gentle humming of singing sand would have provided a constant reminder that the world was still alive, still full of wonders. The tent around you seems to pulse with the rhythm of the sand's song. You imagine Liu Wei sitting in this very spot, perhaps on countless nights during his journeys, listening to his collection of singing sands, each pouch containing memories of distant places and the promise of destinations yet to be reached. That something troubled the merchant enough to abandon his camp so suddenly. The journal's final entries speak of the sand that no longer sings, of routes that had gone mysteriously quiet, of fellow traders who had vanished without a trace. There are references to the silent death and warnings about dunes that had stopped their ancient songs. As you sit in the abandoned tent, the singing sand still humming in your palm, you realize that you're holding not just a handful of grains, but a piece of history, a connection to the countless merchants who had crossed these desert routes, carrying with them the music of the earth itself. The wind outside picks up, and the tent fabric begins to flutter more insistently. The sound mixes with the sand's melody, creating a harmony that seems to tell a story of its own. You can almost hear the footsteps of the caravan that had passed this way, the voices of traders calling out in multiple languages, the patient breathing of camels laden with treasures from distant lands. You carefully retie the pouch and slip it into your own pocket, feeling its warm weight against your side. The humming continues, muffled now, but still present, like a heartbeat or a distant memory. As you prepare to leave the tent, you notice something else. A small silk scroll tucked beneath the corner of a carpet. Unrolling it reveals a map unlike any you've seen before. Instead of mountains and rivers, it shows sound patterns, wavy lines that seem to flow across the parchment like frozen music. Cities are marked not by their names, but by symbols that look like musical notes, and the trade routes are depicted as interweaving melodies that span continents. This is no ordinary map. It's a sonic chart of the Silk Road, a guide to the acoustic landscape that these merchants had learned to navigate by ear. And now, with the pouch of singing sand in your pocket, you're about to embark on a journey to understand how these ancient traders had learned to read the desert song. The tent flap rustles behind you as you step back into the desert night. But the humming continues, growing stronger as if the sand recognizes that it's about to return home. Above you, the stars shine with unusual clarity, and for a moment, you swear you can hear them singing too. Distant, celestial harmonies that seem to echo the earthly music in your pocket. Your journey into the mystery of the singing sand has only just begun, and already you can feel the desert's ancient secrets calling to you across the centuries. You stand at the edge of Lu Wei's abandoned camp, the singing sand still humming softly in your pocket, and realize that to understand this merchant's story, you need to trace his steps backward through the desert. The silk scroll map in your hand shows a route marked with those strange musical symbols, and you decide to follow it in reverse, letting the sand's song guide you toward its origins. The desert night is surprisingly alive with sound. As you begin walking, your footsteps create a soft percussion against the packed earth, and you notice that the sand in your pocket responds to each step, its humming shifting in pitch and rhythm. It's as if the grains recognize the terrain, remembering their journey from wherever they came. You follow what appears to be the remnants of a caravan route. Not a clear path, but rather a series of subtle signs that become more obvious once you know what to look for. Camel dung, dried and bleached white by the sun, marks rest stops. Scattered pottery shards, probably from water vessels, broken during hasty departures, create a breadcrumb trail across the sand. And occasionally, you find small cairns of stones arranged in patterns that must have meant something to the traders who passed this way. The singing sand grows more active as you walk, its melody becoming richer and more complex. You begin to understand that it's not just responding to movement, it's responding to location. Each geographic feature you pass seems to awaken different harmonies within the grains. When you crest a small ridge, the sand sings in higher, more crystalline tones. When you descend into a valley, the melody drops to deeper, more resonant notes. Hours pass, and the first hint of dawn begins to pale the eastern horizon. You've been walking steadily, guided by the subtle clues left by Liu Wei's caravan and the increasingly excited humming of the sand. As the light grows stronger, you begin to see evidence of a much larger story unfolding in the desert around you. The landscape here is scarred by what must have been an enormous sandstorm. Dunes have been reshaped, their smooth curves torn and reformed into jagged ridges. Ancient stone markers, probably placed by countless generations of travelers, lie toppled and half-buried. This wasn't just weather. This was the kind of catastrophic storm that could erase entire trade routes and leave experienced merchants completely lost. You consult Liu Wei's silk map again, and the musical notation begins to make more sense. The wavy lines aren't just decorative, they're acoustic topography, showing how sound travels across different types of terrain. Desert merchants had learned that sand sings differently depending on its composition, moisture content, and the shape of the dunes that contain it. A trader who understood these variations could navigate by sound alone, even when visibility was reduced to mere feet. The sand in your pocket is practically vibrating now, its song becoming so intense that you can feel it resonating through your entire body. You realize you must be approaching something significant, perhaps the location where Liu Wei first acquired this particular sample, or maybe a landmark that held special meaning for the desert traders. As you climb another rise, the singing sand suddenly falls silent. The abrupt cessation of its melody is almost shocking, like having music suddenly cut off in the middle of a favorite song. But as you reach the crest of the hill, you understand why. Spread out before you is a vast field of glass. The sand here has been fused by extreme heat into smooth, twisted sheets of natural glass that stretch for miles in every direction. Lightning strikes during the Great Storm must have been so intense and frequent that they literally melted the desert floor, creating this bizarre landscape of frozen fire. The glass reflects the morning light in millions of tiny rainbows, creating a beauty that's both stunning and somehow terrifying. You pull out the pouch of singing sand and pour a small amount onto your palm. In this place, it remains completely silent, as if the grains are mourning for their transformed siblings, locked forever in glassy imprisonment. But when you move away from the glass field, the humming gradually returns, growing stronger as you distance yourself from the fusion zone. The merchant's journal mentioned the sand that no longer sings, and now you understand at least part of what he meant. This storm hadn't just disrupted trade routes, it had fundamentally altered the acoustic landscape that desert merchants depended on. Singing dunes that had guided travelers for centuries were now silent, their carefully shaped grains fused into mute glass. But Liu Wei's route continues beyond the glass field, marked by increasingly frequent cairns and the occasional piece of carved jade, probably offerings left by grateful travelers at what must have been important waypoints. The singing sand in your pocket seems to grow more eager as you follow these markers, its melody becoming more complex and layered. You notice that you're not alone in this desert. Occasionally, you spot movement in the distance, other figures following similar routes, their outlines wavering in the heat shimmer. Some appear to be mounted on camels, others on foot, all moving with the purposeful gait of people who know exactly where they're going. When you try to approach them, they seem to fade away, leaving you to wonder if they're real travelers or simply mirages created by the desert's endless capacity for illusion. The sun climbs higher, and you find shelter in the shadow of a large rock formation that juts up from the sand like the backbone of some buried giant. The stones are carved with symbols in multiple languages: Chinese characters, Arabic script, what might be Sogdian or Sanskrit. This was clearly a major waypoint, a place where traders from different cultures met and exchanged not just goods, but knowledge. Among the carvings, you find what appears to be a musical staff with notes carved into the stone. Below it, someone has chiseled a small pouch symbol followed by wavy lines. It's a message about the singing sand, left by merchants for other merchants who would understand its meaning. As you rest in the shade, you experiment with the sand, learning to control its song through subtle movements of your hand. Gentle circular motions produce soft, sustained tones. Quick, sharp movements create staccato bursts of sound. By varying the pressure and speed of your gestures, you can make the sand sing in different keys, creating melodies that seem to echo the ancient music carved into the rock. The afternoon heat becomes intense, and you understand why the caravan routes were designed around these shade-providing landmarks. Desert merchants had to be experts, not just in navigation and trade, but in survival itself. They needed to understand where to find water, how to read weather patterns, and how to conserve their strength during the brutal midday hours. But they also needed to understand sound. As you sit listening to the singing sand, you realize that the desert is never truly silent. There's always the whisper of wind across dunes, the distant call of birds, the subtle creaking of stones expanding and contracting with temperature changes. Experienced merchants had learned to read this acoustic environment like a book, finding meaning in every sound. The sand in your pocket suddenly shifts to a new melody, more urgent and complex than before. You look around and realize that the wind has changed direction, bringing with it the scent of something you hadn't expected: water. Following the sand's increasingly excited song, you discover a small oasis hidden behind the rock formation. The water is clear and cold, fed by an underground spring that must have sustained travelers for millennia. Around the pool, you find more evidence of the caravan trade: pottery shards from a dozen different cultures, coins bearing the faces of long-dead emperors, and small personal items that tell stories of individual journeys across this vast wilderness. But most interesting of all, you find several small leather pouches similar to the one in your pocket, each containing different types of sand. Someone, probably Liu Wei himself, had created a cache here, a collection of acoustic samples from different regions along the Silk Road. Each pouch is labeled with symbols that must indicate its origin, and when you open them, each sings with its own distinct voice. The collection tells a story of journeys spanning thousands of miles. Sand from the Gobi Desert sings in low, rumbling tones that seem to echo the vastness of that barren landscape. Grains from the Kaiselkum Desert produce higher, more musical notes that dance and skip like wind chimes. And then there's a pouch labeled with symbols you don't recognize, containing sand that produces the most beautiful song of all, a complex harmony that seems to contain multiple melodies woven together. As evening approaches, you realize that you've been following more than just Lu Wei's physical route. You've been tracing the development of an entire science, the acoustic cartography that allowed desert merchants to navigate by sound. These traders had discovered that the earth itself was musical, that different regions sang in different keys, and that a skilled listener could read these songs like a map. The singing sand in your pocket has grown quiet again, but not with the dead silence you encountered at the glass field. This is a peaceful quiet, the contentment of coming home. You are clearly approaching the source of this particular sand, the dune or desert where these grains first learned to sing. As you prepare to continue your journey, you notice that the other travelers you've been glimpsing throughout the day are converging on the oasis. They arrive in small groups, some mounted, others on foot, all carrying the telltale bulges of sand pouches in their clothing. They nod politely as they water their animals and refill their vessels, but there's something timeless about their appearance, as if they're not quite part of the same century you're visiting. One elderly merchant, his face weathered by decades of desert sun, approaches you with a knowing smile. Without speaking, he produces his own collection of sand pouches and begins to demonstrate their use. His movements are precise, economical, the gestures of someone who has spent a lifetime communicating with the desert's music. He shows you how different sands respond to different techniques. Some sing best when warmed by body heat, others when chilled by night air. Some require gentle handling, while others respond to firm pressure. It's a complex art form, part science and part intuition, passed down through generations of desert travelers. As the stars emerge, the merchant's sand collection creates a symphony of desert sounds. Each pouch contributes its own voice to a harmony that seems to tell the story of the entire Silk Road, the triumph and tragedy, the discovery and loss, the endless human drive to explore and trade and connect across vast distances. You realize that tomorrow's journey will take you to the heart of this mystery, to the singing dunes where merchants first discovered that the earth itself could be their guide and companion. The sand in your pocket hums softly, as if it too is anticipating the reunion with its birthplace. You wake before dawn in the merchant's camp by the oasis, the collection of sand pouches arranged around you like sleeping companions. The elderly merchant who demonstrated their use has vanished with the night, leaving only a small gift, a wooden flute with holes positioned at unusual intervals, clearly designed to work in harmony with the singing sands. The sand in your pocket is already stirring, its melody growing more insistent as the first light touches the eastern horizon. You realize it's responding to something beyond mere movement now. It's reacting to proximity, drawing you toward whatever destination has been calling to it throughout this journey. Following the increasingly excited song of your sand, you leave the oasis behind and enter a landscape unlike anything you've encountered so far. The dunes here are enormous, rising hundreds of feet into the sky, their surfaces sculpted into perfect crescents and ridges that seem almost architectural in their precision. These aren't random piles of sand, they're instruments, carefully shaped by wind and time into formations that can produce sound. As you climb the first massive dune, your footsteps begin to trigger responses from the sand beneath. Each step produces a note, and as you establish a rhythm, the entire slope begins to sing. The sound is incredible, a deep, resonant hum that seems to come from the dune's core, as if the sand is amplifying and sustaining the vibrations you're creating. The singing sand in your pocket has become so active that you can barely contain it. The grains are practically dancing, responding to their proximity to these massive singing dunes with what can only be described as joy. You pour a small amount onto your palm and watch as the individual grains seem to orient themselves toward the great dunes, like iron filings aligning with a magnetic field. From the crest of the first dune, you can see the true scope of what lies before you. This is a vast amphitheater of singing sand, dozens of enormous dunes arranged in patterns that suggest they were somehow cultivated or managed. Between the dunes, you can make out the remains of structures, not buildings exactly, but platforms and observation points constructed from fitted stone. This was clearly more than just a natural phenomenon. Someone had recognized the musical potential of these dunes and had developed them into something approaching an instrument on a geological scale. The stone platforms are positioned at acoustically optimal locations, places where a listener could hear the complex harmonies created when multiple dunes sang simultaneously. As you make your way down into the valley between the dunes, you discover that the sandy floor is covered with a network of channels and ridges that seem designed to direct sound waves. When wind passes through these formations, it creates a constant, low-level harmony that serves as a backdrop for the more dramatic music produced by footsteps or other disturbances. The singing sand in your pocket has gone completely silent now, but not from distress. It's the silence of homecoming, of reunion with its source. When you pour the entire contents of the pouch onto the ground, the grains immediately begin to migrate, flowing across the surface like liquid toward the base of the nearest dune. Watching them go, you understand that you've returned them to where they belong. But as you explore deeper into this valley of singing sands, you begin to understand why Lu Wei's journal spoke of trouble. Many of the dunes are silent now, their surfaces hardened into crusty shells that produce no sound when disturbed. The great storm that created the glass field had effects that reached even here, altering the delicate conditions that allowed the sand to sing. You find evidence of frantic activity in the months before the storm. Stone markers have been moved, new channels carved into the sand, and observation platforms hastily constructed in different locations. The desert merchants had known something was coming and had tried to preserve their acoustic navigation system by relocating the most important singing dunes to protected areas. Some of their efforts had succeeded. In the sheltered valleys between the largest dunes, you find pockets of sand that still sing perfectly, their voices clear and strong. But for every successful preservation, there are 3 or 4 locations where the sand has gone permanently silent, its grains fused or contaminated by the storm's fury. The wooden flute left by the elderly merchant proves to be perfectly tuned to work with the singing sands. When you play simple melodies, the responsive dunes amplify and harmonize with the notes, creating music of incredible complexity and beauty. You begin to understand that this place wasn't just a navigation aid. It was a musical instrument that could be played by anyone who understood its secrets. As you experiment with the flute, you discover carved instructions on some of the stone platforms. The symbols are the same ones you found in Liu Wei's tent, showing how different combinations of notes and rhythms could produce specific responses from the singing sands. This was a language, a way of communicating with the desert itself through music. The afternoon brings visitors. A small caravan appears on the horizon, their camels moving with the steady gait of experienced desert travelers. As they approach, you realize they're following the same route you've been tracing, guided by their own collections of singing sand toward this central location. The caravan consists of merchants from several different cultures, their clothing and equipment showing the influence of Chinese, Persian, and Central Asian traditions. They speak to each other in a mixture of languages, but when they begin working with the singing sands, they communicate in the universal language of music. Each merchant carries multiple pouches of sand from different regions, and they know exactly how to use them. By combining sands from various sources and playing them in specific sequences, they can create detailed acoustic maps of trade routes spanning thousands of miles. A handful of sand from the Fergana Valley, combined with grains from the Pamirs and played in a particular rhythm, produces a melody that any experienced trader would recognize as the route to the jade markets of Khotan. You watch as they conduct what appears to be a business meeting, but instead of speaking, they communicate through the singing sands. Different combinations of sand and rhythm seem to represent different trade goods, market conditions, and route information. It's an incredibly sophisticated system, allowing merchants to share complex information without revealing their secrets to anyone who doesn't understand the acoustic code. But there's an urgency to their work that suggests crisis. Several of the merchants are mapping new routes, trying to find alternatives to traditional paths that no longer produce reliable acoustic signals. The Great Storm had disrupted more than just the physical landscape. It had broken the communication network that connected traders across the entire Silk Road. As evening approaches, the merchants begin a ritual that must be centuries old. They arrange their various sands in complex patterns on the stone platforms, creating what amounts to a three-dimensional map of the entire trade network. Then, using flutes, drums, and other instruments, they begin to play the sands in sequence, creating a musical representation of the entire known world. The performance is breathtaking. Each sand sings with its own voice, representing different cities, regions, and trade routes. As the merchants play, the music tells the story of the Silk Road itself, the flow of goods and ideas, the rise and fall of empires, the constant movement of people and cultures across vast distances. But the music also reveals the damage caused by the recent storm. Certain sections of the song fall silent, representing routes that are no longer viable. Other passages are discordant, showing where the acoustic landmarks have been disrupted. The merchants are literally composing new music to replace the old, creating fresh navigation aids for a changed world. You realize that you're witnessing the adaptation of an entire civilization to environmental catastrophe. These desert merchants had built their entire navigation system around the singing sands. And when that system was disrupted, they didn't despair. They innovated. They're creating new songs, new routes, new ways of reading the acoustic landscape. As the performance reaches its climax, all the sands begin to sing together in perfect harmony. The sound is overwhelming, not just music, but the voice of the earth itself, speaking in a language that transcends human culture. and connects directly to something fundamental about the nature of sound and vibration. The merchants conclude their ritual by redistributing the sands, each taking samples that will allow them to maintain acoustic contact with the others as they travel their separate routes. It's a network maintained not by technology, but by music, a communication system that depends on the Earth's own capacity to sing. As they prepare to depart, one of the merchants approaches you with a knowing smile. Without speaking, he presses a small pouch into your hand, not the original singing sand you've been carrying, but something new. When you open it, the sand inside produces a melody unlike any you've heard before. It's a song of the future, a navigation aid for routes that don't exist yet, but will be needed as the world changes. The merchant gestures toward the horizon where the first stars are becoming visible. His meaning is clear. Your journey isn't over. The singing sands have more secrets to reveal, and tomorrow will bring you to places where the ancient art of acoustic navigation faces its greatest challenges. As the caravan disappears into the gathering darkness, you settle down to rest among the singing dunes. The sand around you hums softly, a lullaby that seems to contain the dreams of countless travelers who found their way across the desert by listening to the Earth's own music. The pre-dawn darkness wraps around you like a familiar blanket as you prepare to leave the Valley of Singing Dunes. The new sand pouch given to you by the merchant pulses with an energy that's different from what you've experienced before. This isn't just navigation aid. It's prophecy made tangible, a guide to futures that haven't yet crystallized into reality. As you climb out of the valley, following the merchant's gesture toward the distant horizon, you notice that the landscape is changing again. The massive singing dunes give way to smaller, more scattered formations, and between them, you begin to see evidence of human habitation. Not the temporary camps of traveling merchants, but permanent structures built by people who had learned to live with the singing sands as their constant companions. The first settlement you encounter appears to be abandoned, its mud brick buildings half buried by drifting sand. But as you explore the empty streets, you discover that this abandonment was deliberate and recent. The buildings have been carefully sealed, their doorways blocked with fitted stones that bear the same musical notation you've been seeing throughout your journey. This isn't destruction, it's preservation, as if the inhabitants knew they would need to return someday. In the center of the settlement, you find a structure unlike any you've seen. A circular building with no roof, its walls lined with carefully shaped alcoves at precise intervals. When you step inside, the sand in your pocket immediately begins to sing, and the alcoves amplify and modify the sound in complex ways. This was an acoustic laboratory, a place where the desert dwellers had experimented with different ways of shaping and controlling the singing sands. The alcoves contain residues of different types of sand, each one producing its own unique tone when disturbed. By moving between the alcoves in different patterns, you can create melodies of incredible complexity. But more than that, you begin to understand that this building was designed to teach. It's a musical instrument that also functions as a school, allowing students to learn the art of acoustic navigation through direct experience. The new sand in your pocket responds to this place with unusual intensity. When you pour a small amount onto the central platform, it doesn't just sing, it harmonizes with the residues in the alcoves, creating a chord that seems to contain multiple melodies simultaneously. It's as if this sand remembers not just where it came from, but where it's going, and it's trying to teach you something about the connection between past and future. As you experiment with the acoustic properties of the building, you begin to notice patterns in the sound that match the star charts you've been seeing throughout your journey. The desert dwellers hadn't just learned to navigate by sound. They had discovered that the Earth's music was somehow connected to the movement of celestial bodies. The singing sands weren't just responding to local conditions. They were part of a larger harmony that included the entire cosmos, following the increasingly complex melodies of your sand guide. You leave the settlement and enter a landscape that seems to exist at the intersection of multiple realities. The terrain here shifts constantly, as if the very ground is uncertain about what it wants to be. Sometimes you're walking on solid rock, other times on sand so fine it flows like water. The singing sands in your pocket respond to each change with different melodies, creating a musical map of transformations that ordinary vision couldn't detect. This is where the traditional maps end and the real adventure begins. The silk scroll you've been carrying shows routes that extend beyond the known world, into territories that exist as much in possibility as in physical reality. The desert merchants hadn't just been traders, they had been explorers of space and time, using the singing sands to navigate not just across distance, but across potential futures. The sun rises over a landscape that seems to exist in multiple time periods simultaneously. In the distance, you can see what appears to be a bustling city, its towers and domes gleaming in the morning light. But when you try to approach it, the city shifts and changes, sometimes appearing as a thriving metropolis, other times as ancient ruins, and occasionally as empty desert where no city has ever stood. The sand in your pocket guides you toward this temporal mirage, its song growing more urgent as you approach. You realize that you're not just moving through space anymore. You're moving through time, following trade routes that exist in the spaces between moments, connecting past and future in ways that ordinary geography couldn't accommodate. As you get closer to the shifting city, you begin to encounter other travelers. But these aren't the desert merchants you've been following. These are people from different eras entirely. Some dressed in the silk robes of Tang Dynasty officials, others wearing the practical clothing of modern archaeologists, and still others in garments that seem to belong to no historical period you can identify. They all carry singing sands, but their pouches contain grains that produce sounds you've never heard before. Some sing in frequencies so high they're almost beyond human hearing, while others produce bass notes so deep they seem to vibrate in your bones. These are sands from times that haven't happened yet, navigation aids for futures that are still being composed. One of the temporal travelers, a woman whose age seems to shift depending on how you look at her, approaches you with a knowing smile. She gestures to your sand pouch and nods approvingly. Somehow, the future sand you've been carrying has marked you as someone who belongs in this space between times. Without speaking, she leads you to a vantage point overlooking the shifting city. From here, you can see that the buildings aren't just changing their appearance, they're cycling through their entire history, showing you every moment of their existence simultaneously. The singing sands in your pocket respond to this temporal compression with a melody that seems to contain entire symphonies compressed into single notes. The woman produces her own sand collection, and when she plays it, the music tells a story that spans millennia. You hear the rise and fall of empires, the discovery and loss of trade routes, the continuous human struggle to understand and navigate an ever-changing world. But you also hear something else, the sound of possibility itself, the music of potential futures waiting to be born. As the day progresses, you begin to understand that this place is a nexus, a location where all the trade routes of space and time converge. The desert merchants had discovered it centuries ago, and they had been using it as a hub for commerce that extended far beyond the exchange of physical goods. They were trading in ideas, possibilities, and futures themselves. The shifting city below begins to stabilize as you watch, settling into a form that seems to represent the intersection of all its possible states. The buildings become clearer, revealing architecture that combines elements from every era. Chinese pagodas growing from Roman foundations, Islamic geometric patterns decorating Gothic spires, and modern glass structures that somehow harmonize with ancient stone. The sand in your pocket has become so active that you can barely contain it. When you pour it onto the ground, the grains don't just migrate, they transform, changing color and texture as they flow toward the city below. You're watching the physical manifestation of temporal navigation, sand that can adapt to any era it encounters. Following the transformed sand, you descend toward the city, passing through what feels like layers of time. Each step takes you deeper into the intersection of past and future, where the singing sands have learned to harmonize with the music of centuries. The sound is overwhelming, not just the songs of different eras, but the harmony that emerges when all possibilities sing together. As you enter the city's outskirts, you find yourself in a marketplace unlike any you've ever imagined. The stalls don't just sell goods from different places, they sell goods from different times. A merchant offers silk that hasn't been woven yet, while another trades in memories of expeditions that ended centuries ago. The currency isn't gold or silver, but songs, melodies that represent the value of different possibilities. The singing sands from your pocket have dispersed throughout the marketplace, each grain finding its way to the merchant or customer who needs it most. You realize that you've been carrying more than just navigation aids. You've been carrying the seeds of future possibilities, and now you're watching them take root in the soil of potential. As evening approaches, the temporal city settles into a rhythm that seems to accommodate all its different eras simultaneously. The sun sets over buildings that exist in multiple centuries, casting shadows that fall both forward and backward through time. The singing sands throughout the marketplace create a harmony that tells the story of human civilization itself. All the journeys taken, all the discoveries made, all the connections forged across the vast distances of space and time. Tomorrow's journey will take you to the heart of this temporal marketplace, where the most skilled merchants trade not just in goods, but in the very fabric of reality itself. The future sand you've been carrying has prepared you for this final destination, where the art of acoustic navigation reaches its ultimate expression. The morning finds you standing at the entrance to the temporal marketplace's inner sanctum, where the most advanced practitioners of acoustic navigation gather to conduct business that transcends ordinary understanding of commerce. The future sand you've been carrying has completely transformed overnight. its grains now shimmering with an opalescent quality that seems to contain tiny fragments of starlight. As you venture deeper into the heart of the marketplace, you discover that the stalls here don't sell physical objects at all. Instead, they trade in pure sound, crystallized melodies that represent entire trade routes, harmonies that can unlock doors between different eras, and rhythms that pulse with the heartbeat of civilizations yet to be born. The merchants in this section are unlike any you've encountered before. Their ages seem fluid, shifting between youth and antiquity as they work with their sonic wares. Some appear to be made partially of sand themselves, their bodies constantly shifting and reforming as they handle the temporal grains that are their stock in trade. One such merchant, whose fingers leave trails of musical notation in the air as she moves, approaches you with eyes that seem to contain the memory of every sunset that has ever painted the desert sky. She gestures toward a crystalline structure at the center of the marketplace, a building that appears to be constructed entirely from compressed singing sand, its walls transparent and resonant with accumulated centuries of sound. This is the archive of echoes, where the desert merchants store the most precious sounds they've collected throughout their journeys across time and space. Inside, you discover that the walls themselves are memory, each grain of sand containing the acoustic signature of a moment in history. When you touch the surface, you can hear the conversations of Tang Dynasty poets, the laughter of children in Samarkand's gardens, the final words of explorers who never returned from their expeditions into the unknown. The Sand Merchant leads you to a particular section of the archive where the walls glow with a soft, pulsing light. Here, stored in crystallized form, are the songs that have guided the most important journeys in human history. You recognize some of the melodies. They're the same ones you've been hearing throughout your own journey, but here they exist in their pure, original form, undiluted by time or distance. She explains, through a combination of gestures and musical phrases played on sand instruments, that these archived sounds serve as seeds for future possibilities. When the right conditions arise, these crystallized melodies can be released back into the world, where they will guide new generations of travelers toward discoveries that haven't yet been made. You realize that your entire journey has been one of these seeded possibilities. The singing sand you found in Lu Wei's tent wasn't just a navigation aid. It was a message from the future, a guide placed in your path by merchants who had seen the need for your specific journey across the landscapes of time. As you explore deeper into the archive, you encounter other travelers who, like you, have been guided here by their own collections of singing sand. Each tells a different story, but all share the common thread of following acoustic navigation into realms beyond ordinary geography. There's a woman who followed whale songs across frozen seas that existed only in winter dreams. A man who used the resonance of mountain peaks to navigate through centuries of political upheaval, and a child who seems to understand the language of wind through desert canyons that span multiple dimensions. The archive's central chamber contains the most precious collection of all, the master songs, melodies so complex and beautiful that they represent the great storm that disrupted the traditional singing sands. Wasn't a disaster. It was a graduation ceremony, a signal that the time had come for the next phase of human development. The old navigation systems had taught their lessons, and now it was time for more advanced explorations into the territories of possibility. As this understanding crystallizes in your mind, the archive around you begins to sing with unprecedented complexity. Every grain of sand in the building resonates with the others, creating a symphony that tells the story of consciousness itself, learning to navigate through the infinite possibilities of existence. The sand merchant gestures toward a doorway that has appeared in the archive's far wall, not a physical door, but an opening in the fabric of space-time itself. Through it, you can see landscapes that exist beyond geography, territories of pure potential, where the most advanced practitioners of acoustic navigation conduct their explorations. But before you can step through that doorway, you must complete one final task. The merchant hands you an instrument unlike any you've seen, a flute carved from crystallized time itself, its surface covered with holes that correspond not to musical notes, but to moments of decision that have shaped the course of history. When you play this temporal flute, the sound it produces doesn't just travel through air, it travels through possibility itself. Each note you play creates ripples in the fabric of reality, opening pathways that connect past and future in ways that ordinary causality cannot explain. The merchant nods approvingly as you experiment with the instrument. She can see that you understand its purpose. This is how the most skilled acoustic navigators shape reality itself, using sound to guide not just their own journeys, but the evolution of consciousness throughout the cosmos. As the day progresses, you practice with the temporal flute under the merchant's guidance. You learn to play melodies that can slow time during moments of beauty, accelerate it during periods of necessary change, and create pauses in the flow of causality where new possibilities can take root and grow. The other travelers in the archive gather around as you play, their own collections of singing sand responding to your music with unprecedented enthusiasm. Together, you create a chorus that spans multiple dimensions, a harmony that connects every moment of every journey that has ever been taken by anyone seeking to understand the deeper patterns of existence. The sun begins to set over the temporal marketplace, but here in the archive, the light doesn't fade. It transforms, becoming the illumination of understanding itself. The crystalline walls glow with the accumulated wisdom of every traveler who has ever followed the singing sands into territories beyond ordinary exploration. As evening deepens, the sand merchant leads you to a final chamber where the most precious gift of all awaits. Here, suspended in crystallized sound, is the master key, a melody so perfect and complete that it can unlock any door in existence, including the doors between different levels of reality itself. She explains that this key has been waiting for someone who would undertake the complete journey, who would follow the singing sands from their simplest navigation applications to their most advanced expressions as tools for consciousness evolution. Your journey has prepared you to receive this gift and to use it responsibly in the explorations that lie ahead. When you accept the master key, it doesn't take physical form. Instead, it becomes part of your understanding, a melody that you will always carry within you. Now, No matter where your future journeys take you, you will always be able to find your way home to the deeper harmonies that connect all existence. The doorway to the territories beyond geography pulses with invitation. And you know that tomorrow will bring the most extraordinary adventure of all. A journey into the spaces between spaces, where the singing sands have learned to harmonize with the music of pure possibility itself. The dawn that greets you exists in a space between all dawns, where the light carries the memory of every sunrise that has ever painted the desert sky, while simultaneously holding the promise of sunrises yet to come. The doorway to the territories beyond geography stands before you, its edges shimmering with the accumulated songs of every traveler who has ever crossed this threshold into the realm of pure possibility. As you step through, the sensation is unlike anything you've experienced in your journey so far. You're not just moving through space, you're moving through the fabric of reality itself, following pathways that exist in the spaces between thoughts, between heartbeats, between the moments when one possibility transforms into another. The landscape that emerges around you defies every conventional understanding of geography. Mountains grow from clouds, rivers flow upward into crystal formations that ring like bells when touched by wind, and the ground beneath your feet feels like solidified music, each step producing harmonies that ripple outward in visible waves of color and sound. The master key melody that you now carry within your understanding serves as your guide through this impossible terrain. Each note corresponds to a different aspect of reality's deeper structure, allowing you to navigate through dimensions that exist beyond ordinary perception. When you hum the melody, pathways appear in the air itself, bridges of crystallized sound that can support your weight as you traverse the gaps between different levels of existence. Here, the singing sands have evolved beyond their earthly origins to become something entirely new, particles of pure potential that respond not just to physical movement, but to the movement of consciousness itself. They swirl around you in patterns that mirror the neural networks of thought, creating visual representations of the learning process that has brought you to this extraordinary destination. In the distance, you can see structures that seem to be built from materialized mathematics, their geometric forms constantly shifting as they solve equations that describe the relationship between sound, space, and the evolution of awareness. These are the laboratories of the most advanced acoustic navigators, places where the principles you've been learning throughout your journey are applied to the fundamental challenges of existence itself. As you approach the first of these probability structures, you encounter beings whose nature transcends the ordinary categories of human and non-human. They appear to be made of crystallized time, their forms shifting between different states of existence as they work with instruments that can measure and manipulate the harmonics of reality itself. One of these temporal architects greets you with a melody that bypasses language entirely, communicating directly with the part of your consciousness that has been awakened by your journey with the singing sands. The communication feels like remembering something you've always known but had forgotten. The understanding that all existence is essentially musical, and that what we call physical reality is simply one particular harmony in an infinite symphony of possibility. The architect guides you to an observation platform overlooking what appears to be a vast concert hall where the universe itself is performing. The audience consists of consciousness from every level of existence, from the simple awareness of individual sand grains to the cosmic consciousness that guides the movement of galaxies. They're all listening to the same performance, but each hears something different based on their level of understanding and their particular journey through the territories of possibility. From this vantage point, you can see the true scope of the acoustic navigation system you've been learning to use. The singing sands aren't just tools for finding your way across the desert. They're instruments for navigating the infinite landscape of consciousness itself. Every grain contains the potential for unlimited exploration, and every melody can open doorways to realms that exist beyond the boundaries of space and time. The temporal architect shares with you the secret that the most advanced practitioners guard most carefully: the understanding that the journey itself is the destination. Every step you've taken, every sand grain you followed, every melody you've learned to play has been changing you at the deepest levels of your being. You haven't just been learning to navigate. You've been becoming something new, something capable of existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. As you absorb this understanding, you feel the final transformation beginning. The singing sands that have guided your journey don't just exist in your pocket anymore. They exist within your consciousness, integrated into the very structure of your awareness. You've become a living instrument of acoustic navigation, capable of finding your way through any territory of existence. The architect leads you to a final chamber where the ultimate secret is revealed. Here, suspended in crystallized silence, is the source of all singing sands, the original song, the first melody that emerged from the void and began the process of creation itself. This is the sound that gave birth to space and time, the harmony that organized chaos into the patterns we call reality. But as you approach this ultimate source, you realize that it's not separate from you. It's the same melody that has been playing in your heart throughout your entire journey. The singing sands didn't lead you to this destination. They led you to the recognition that you were always already here, in the space where consciousness meets its own creative potential. The original song begins to play, and as it does, you understand that your journey with the singing sands has been a journey of remembering. Every grain of sand that sang to you was a note in your own consciousness. Every melody you learned to play was a harmony you were recovering from the depths of your own being. As the song reaches its crescendo, the boundaries between inner and outer reality dissolve completely. You are simultaneously the traveler and the destination, the seeker and the treasure, the student and the teacher. The singing sands have taught you the ultimate lesson of acoustic navigation, that all exploration is ultimately self-discovery, and that the territories we seek to explore already exist within the infinite landscape of consciousness itself. The temporal architect smiles as you complete this final understanding. With a gesture that encompasses all of existence, they indicate that your real journey is just beginning. Now that you understand the true nature of acoustic navigation, you can begin to explore the infinite territories that exist within every moment, every breath, every heartbeat. The sun sets over the territories beyond geography, but you know that this sunset is also a sunrise, the beginning of endless explorations into the spaces between spaces, where consciousness learns to dance with its own infinite creativity. The singing sands have brought you home to yourself, and from this home, every journey becomes possible. Tomorrow will bring the final integration of everything you've learned, the moment when the student becomes the teacher and the journey transforms into the gift you'll carry back to the world of ordinary reality. But tonight, you rest in the perfect harmony of understanding, surrounded by the singing sands that have revealed themselves to be the music of your own awakening consciousness. The final morning arrives not as a single dawn, but as the convergence of all the mornings you've experienced throughout your journey. The uncertain light in Liu Wei's tent, the crystalline sunrise over the valley of singing dunes, the opalescent dawn in the temporal marketplace, and the impossible sunrise in the territories beyond geography. They merge into a single moment of perfect understanding, where time itself becomes a melody you can play with conscious intention. You find yourself standing at the threshold between the extraordinary territories you've explored and the ordinary world you once knew. But now you understand that this distinction itself was an illusion created by limited perception. The singing sands have taught you that every grain of ordinary sand contains infinite possibility, and every moment of ordinary time holds the potential for transcendent exploration. The master key melody that lives within your consciousness now begins to play a new variation. Not the complex harmonies of advanced acoustic navigation, but the simple, pure notes that can transform everyday experience into a journey of discovery. This is the gift you've been prepared to carry back, the ability to find the extraordinary within the ordinary, to navigate the territories of possibility that exist within every moment of conventional life. As you take your first steps back toward the world of markets and caravans, you notice that the singing sands haven't disappeared. They've simply integrated into your awareness in a way that allows you to perceive the music that was always present in ordinary reality. The sound of wind through desert rocks becomes a navigation melody. The rhythm of camel bells transforms into a temporal compass, and the voices of merchants in the marketplace reveal themselves as harmonies in the great symphony of human consciousness learning to recognize itself. You realize that every person you encounter is carrying their own collection of singing sands, whether they know it or not. Each individual consciousness is a unique instrument in the cosmic orchestra, and the art of acoustic navigation is simply the skill of learning to play your own part while harmonizing with the music that others are creating through their own journeys of discovery. The caravans you rejoin are the same ones you left behind, but your perception of them has been transformed completely. You can see the invisible trade routes that connect not just cities, but states of consciousness. The merchants aren't just exchanging goods. They're sharing melodies of possibility, songs of transformation that travel along the Silk Road like seeds of awakening consciousness. Liu Wei greets you with a knowing smile when you return to his tent. The pouch of singing sand that began your journey still sits in its honored place. But now you understand that it was never about that particular collection of grains. It was about awakening your capacity to hear the music that exists everywhere, in every grain of sand, in every breath of wind, in every moment of existence. He asks you to share the story of your journey, And as you speak, you realize that the telling itself is a form of acoustic navigation. Your words become melodies that guide listeners toward their own discoveries, and the story transforms into a living map that others can follow toward their own encounters with the territories of possibility. But you also understand that no two journeys will be exactly the same. The singing sands adapt to each traveler's unique consciousness, creating individualized pathways of discovery that honor both the universal principles of acoustic navigation and the singular nature of each person's journey toward self-understanding. As the days pass, you begin to notice other travelers who have been touched by their own encounters with the singing sands. Some have followed different routes, through mountain passes where echoes teach lessons about the relationship between sound and space, along river valleys where the music of flowing water reveals the temporal patterns underlying change, across frozen landscapes where the silence itself becomes a teacher of the deepest mysteries. Each of these travelers carries their own version of the master key, their own understanding of how consciousness can navigate through the infinite territories of possibility. Together, you form an informal network of acoustic navigators, sharing discoveries and supporting each other's continued exploration of the extraordinary dimensions that exist within ordinary experience. You establish a practice of gathering at oases along the trade routes, where you and other practitioners create temporary laboratories for exploring the practical applications of acoustic navigation. You teach newcomers how to recognize the songs that their own consciousness is always singing, how to use these inner melodies as compasses for navigating through the challenges and opportunities of daily life. The singing sands become tools for transformation that extend far beyond geographical navigation. You learn to use them for healing, helping people find their way back to harmony when illness or trauma has disrupted their inner music. You discover applications for communication that transcend language barriers, allowing people from different cultures to share understanding through the universal language of acoustic harmony. Most importantly, you begin to understand that the ultimate destination of all acoustic navigation is the present moment itself. The singing sands haven't led you to a distant territory. They've led you to a deeper appreciation of the infinite richness that exists within every moment of ordinary experience. As months pass, you notice that your perception of time has been fundamentally altered. The linear progression from past to future that once seemed so fixed now reveals itself as just one possible rhythm in the vast symphony of temporal possibility. You can access the wisdom of the past when you need guidance, glimpse the potential of the future when you need inspiration, and rest in the eternal present when you need peace. The singing sands have taught you that consciousness itself is the ultimate navigation instrument, capable of finding its way through any territory of existence. Every challenge becomes an opportunity to practice acoustic navigation. Every relationship becomes a chance to harmonize with another consciousness. Every moment becomes a note in the endless melody of awakening awareness. Years later, as you continue your travels along the Silk Road, you carry with you the understanding that the greatest treasure isn't gold or silk or spices. It's the capacity to hear the music that existence is always playing, the ability to dance with the rhythms of possibility, and the wisdom to recognize that every journey is ultimately a journey home to the infinite creativity of consciousness itself. The singing sands continue to guide you, but now they sing not just in your pocket, but in your heart, in your breath, in every step you take along the pathways of possibility that connect all existence in one vast, harmonious, ever-evolving symphony of awakening consciousness. The story ends where it began, with the simple recognition that everything that exists is singing, and that the art of living is the art of learning to join that song with the full depth and beauty of your own unique voice in the cosmic chorus of being. And so you drift now, carried by the gentle rhythm of your own breathing, like a traveler resting at an oasis after a long journey across the singing deserts of possibility. The melodies you've discovered continue to play softly in the spaces between your thoughts, harmonizing with the quiet music of your heartbeat, the whispered songs of air moving through your lungs. The singing sands have taught you their deepest secret, that every moment of rest is also a moment of navigation. Every breath, a step along pathways that exist beyond the boundaries of waking consciousness. As sleep approaches, you're not leaving the territories of exploration behind. You're entering the most mysterious realm of all, where dreams become the ultimate acoustic navigation system. Tonight, your dreams will carry traces of crystallized time, echoes of the master key melody, fragments of the original song that gave birth to existence itself. You might find yourself walking through valleys where sand dunes hum lullabies in languages older than memory, or floating through temporal marketplaces where consciousness trades stories with itself across infinite dimensions of possibility. The merchants of the Silk Road knew this secret, that sleep itself is a journey, and that the singing sands work most powerfully when the mind releases its need to control the direction of travel. In dreams, you become pure navigation, pure exploration, pure harmony with the rhythms that guide all existence toward its own deepest understanding. Let the singing sands carry you now into the territories of rest, where every grain contains a dream, every melody opens a doorway to peaceful exploration. The acoustic navigation continues, even as your conscious mind releases its grip on the journey, trusting the deeper wisdom that knows how to find its way through any landscape, including the infinite, gentle territories of sleep. Rest well, fellow traveler. The singing sands will watch over your dreams, ensuring safe passage through all the mysterious realms that await your sleeping consciousness.